1.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Utah State Board of Education Finance Committee. We are happy to have you all here. We have a wonderful agenda of items that we were unable to complete at our early May meeting. So we've called this meeting to get those things all wrapped up. My name is Kristen Norton. My district is District 15 in Southern Utah. And if the other members of the board would make sure your number is before your name so that we can easily see your votes when they come together. And if you would go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Chair?
Yes.
So this is Christina Bogus. Unfortunately, my home internet is down and I don't know how to change my name on my phone.
Okay.
I apologize for that. I'm trying to figure it out.
Usually you just click on those.
I can take care of it if you tell me.
Okay, thank you so much. That would be very helpful.
Thank you, sir. I'll text it to you.
All right. Other members of the board? Vice Chair Davis, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Cindy Davis. I represent District 11. I'm happy to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you. And our board chair, Jim Moss, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hey, sorry, had to grab something off the printer. Are we just doing introductions?
We are.
Jim Moss, Finance Committee, District 12.
Thank you. Board Member Straight, I can see he's here. So Board Member Straight.
It's going to have a stoplight. All right, so Brent Straight, District 3.
En route to graduation.
Yes.
That's what we all are so happy to have. And then, oh, okay, I can see Board Member Bogus is on. Go ahead, Board Member Bogus.
Oh, thank you. This is Board Member Bogus. I serve West Valley City, Taylorsville, and West Jordan.
We appreciate that. We have a number of staff along with administration on with us, and we have a public comment from another one of our board members, Board Member Carol Lillard. So at this point, we will go to public comment, and looks like we have 4 people that have asked to make a comment. Comments are limited today to 2 minutes. And Cami, who do we have up first?
We can start with, it looks like Autumn Cook.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thanks for allowing me a couple minutes to speak. And also thanks for the laborious work you guys do to help everybody involved in the public education system. So I'm interested in commenting on the rule on absenteeism. And as you consider the best way to write this rule, I'd like to share a few things that I learned when a chronic absenteeism law was passed when I lived in Nebraska about 12 years ago. So first, as you consider how to draft this, please take pains to preserve the distinction between truancy and chronic absenteeism. Truancy is missing school without an excuse, essentially skipping, while the other is missing school because a parent judges it to be in a child's best interest, illness, family crisis, travel, etc. And lumping the two together, we found does a tragic disservice to students who have legitimate reasons to miss a lot of school. So in Nebraska, I saw it lead to dozens, literally dozens, over 100 tragic situations, like a chronically ill student being sent to school so she could lay sick in the nurse's office all day just so she could be counted present. I saw a quiet, gentle 14-year-old honors student with she had severe seasonal allergies. And she was put in a diversion program ordered by the state policy at the time with students with serious behavior problems. And it left her mother really concerned for her welfare and also feeling very powerless to prevent it. So specific to your work today, I guess I'd ask, please don't delete the references to truancy in lines 2, 46, 130 and 132 of the draft rule. And please don't delete lines 46 through 50, which define the difference between types of absence, because those distinctions are just crucial to good policy playing out well. In most of the studies that demonstrate the impact of absence on academic performance, they don't disaggregate excused versus unexcused. So we don't have really good data on that. But the few studies that I've seen that break them out suggest that skipping school has a much different impact from being excused by parents. So second thought, last one, I appreciate that the law was written with a prohibition on punitive approaches. That's awesome. And so I just ask you to please focus on any efforts to improve attendance as you draft those. Focus on positive encouragement to make sure that we protect the positive relationship between schools and families by maintaining the respect for parental excuse in every case.
You're muted, Chair.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I'm in a school setting and school just got out and I'm afraid we're going to have a whole bunch of announcements come on. So I quickly muted, but I will unmute here and there. Thank you very much for your comments, Autumn. All right, next up.
I have Wendy Hart next.
Wendy Hart, okay.
Can you hear me? Okay, so my name is Wendy Hart. I served on the Alpine School District Board of Education for 8 years. And during that period of time, our board unanimously passed a policy that allows parents and guardians to excuse their children for any reason that the parent deems necessary, which we found as a board was consistent with state code that says that the parents are the primary person or entity responsible for the upbringing of their children, and that the schools are to be secondary and supportive to the parents. And so I would kind of ditto what Mrs. Cook just had to say about making sure that there is a very clear distinction between excused absences where the parent is aware and has made that decision versus those where the student is skipping school and the parent has not given their consent for that. As she mentioned, I also have looked into some of those studies, and most of the time the negative academic outcome really is not seen hardly at all with those students who are excused by their parents. Obviously, if you have some chronic illness that takes you out of school for 20 days, that's going to have an impact on your education. But if you've got that kind of chronic illness, that may not be the most important thing. And to have that, the state come in, even if it's we want to suggest, we want to invite, that can have a potential negative impact. This is a little bit off topic, but I have a special needs child. And when my child was born, the state came in offering, as they should, all of the, early intervention information. But the way that it was presented to me, it came in it felt like fear. I felt like if I didn't accept every intervention, that Child Protective Services was going to be on my door. And I'm already dealing with what do I do to deal with this the best I can for my child. And so I think we need to be very, very sensitive, especially for parents who are excusing their children for, it could be mental health issues, it could be chronic illnesses, but we need to be very, very sensitive to offer interventions, but allow them the option to not accept those. And I think there may be that wiggle room that you have in reading the state code, because the other side of state code deals with truancy, and we want to make sure that we allow for those valid excuses. We also don't want to circumvent ADA. So if you have a child with a disability, whether physical or mental, we don't run into those troubles as well. So I would recommend doing some sort of bifurcation and to distinguish between what do we do if it's an unexcused absence pattern versus excused absences. And I appreciate your help and your work, and thank you for giving me this time.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time too, Ms. Hart. All right, next.
Next, we'll hear from Natalie Clausen.
Okay, thank you. I appreciated those two other comments, and I agree with the points that they made, which I think we're really important. And as a parent with school-age children, I get really concerned when I feel like that the government is taking more control away from parents and going in between the parent and child relationship and becoming more involved. And I'm also very concerned about not having a distinction between excused and unexcused absences. And the parent should have that opportunity to decide what absences can be excused. I just got back from our school's field day, and as we walk into the elementary school, there's a big poster on the door that says, if you have any of the following symptoms, please stay home. And what we dealt with this last couple of years with COVID is we've created a culture where children, and for better or for worse, are really concerned about being in public when they're scared, when they're sick in any way. If they have a slight cough, if they are not feeling well, and their peers are quick to point out often if they are coughing, oh, get away, I'm worried about, I don't want to be by you, you're sick. So we have a culture now where people are much more concerned about being in public settings when they're sick. And so I'm really concerned about these children now and parents who are in between this conflict of, my child isn't feeling well, do I keep them at home? But then we're going to max out on our number of absences, and will I have the state intervening in my family's life because of that? So I think it puts the family in a very difficult situation because of that stress now, because of medical reasons. And parents should have the opportunity to excuse their children to stay home when they are sick, so that we don't pass on these diseases that we know can be very harmful for a lot of families. So that's one group of people I'm really concerned about, is children who are sick. And I'm also concerned about the children who are missing because of often they're involved in extracurricular activities or they're high achievers and they have legitimate reasons for missing school. Often, I know we're concerned about grades, but often being on the football team, they have to have their grades have to meet a certain standard to be able to participate. And so we do have a check in place that they're performing well in school to be able to continue to do these activities. But there's a lot of families that these are very important activities. I know families who have their children involved in competitive gymnastics teams or ski teams or sports programs that are missing school for those reasons. And as long as the children are able to stay caught up, it should be in the parents have the opportunity to choose if they have these excused absences. So I appreciate you looking at this carefully, and I really hope that you're looking at the parents. And I know we're in a situation right now where there's becoming more of a distrust between parents and schools and parents and government and interventions. And please listen to the parents and do what you can to make the public school setting and charter school setting somewhere that parents can feel like they are being listened to and heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay, and our final public comment is Board Member Carol Lear.
Carol, you're muted.
There you go. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to go quickly. I worked with the staff, worked carefully with HB 400 and came up with another draft because I thought there were a lot of problems with the very earlier drafts. So there's nothing sacred about this draft, but I thought that my effort was to correct some problems. So let me just point out what some of the issues are, or some of the main points are in the new draft. There is a clear distinction between compulsory ed and truancy. Compulsory ed being for younger students where the parents are primarily responsible, and truancy being for older students where parents believe they're dropping their 9th grader off at the door and the student's walking out the back door. And I'm hoping some of you have experienced that like I did, and when it really should be the primary responsibility of the student. That's on line 37 through 40. The second change was a better definition. Thank you, Board Member Davis, and also Specialist Florence, who helped find a better definition of behavioral health. And that's on line 23. And then third change was moving the total responsibility from this for an LEA to allow schools to have more input and in their own policies, so that the LEA would still, as the law requires, as HB 400 requires, that there would still be oversight and a model, or not a model policy, at least the minimum standards set by the LEA. But I think it's unrealistic to expect a big school district like Alpine or Granite to be intimately involved with 50, 70 attendance policies. And it also would stay closer to the constituents if schools were involved at the LEA's discretion. So I added school where I could. I tried to simplify, fourth thing, and make as much discretionary as possible for the LEA, looking closely at HB 400. Specifically, I have one more amendment that I was going to suggest might also work. I want to make a couple of comments in response to the comments, because I was lucky enough to be last. I think it's important to note those definitions are deleted from the rule because they're not used in the rule. They would still be, if they're in the law, they would still be necessarily applicable to all the LEAs. But if they're not used in the rule, they shouldn't be in the rule. That's why I deleted those in my draft, not for any dislike of valid excuse, but that is defined in the rule. And LEAs are in the law, and per the law, LEAs can broaden that definition, and that's what I thought that LEAs would have the opportunity to do. Finally, I just would suggest one more amendment that's very simple, and it's as a result of seeing several posts today on the internet that, and I would suggest this for line 106, but it could go anywhere, and that is just specifically noting that an LEA or school can use interventions as provided in 53G-6-2061 and 53G-6-2063, that would be an improvement, but we shouldn't list those interventions because they're already listed in the law. So we are not supposed to, in rule writing, restate language that's already in the law. So I think that I hope you think this is an improvement, and again, nothing sacred about it. Amend it as you want, but I think it was had some improved elements from the earlier drafts. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. We appreciate your help. Okay, so that brings us then to our second item on our agenda today, which is Rule R277607, Attendance Promotion and Chronic Absenteeism Prevention. Okay, and I see Board Member Bogus's hand.
Yes, Chair, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. If it's acceptable, I would actually like to move draft 8 of this for consideration and amendments. And if possible, I would like to speak to that really quickly before we go after this.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have, this is now, the third draft that I've worked on. I actually reached out to the upper echelon, if you will, of the Granite School District and the Jordan School District. I've worked with Board Member Hymas. I've worked with a number of people in the Salt Lake District, and really what the consensus was, the overarching thing is that the rule as it's written, and I like a lot of Member Lear's things in there, it does help a little bit, but really the rule as it's written is very prescriptive, and it's a little incongruent still as it lays things out. And so this draft, I got a thumbs up from other members of the board. I have a thumbs up from Granite, and it just really pares down to the law. So for example, we have some definitions in there, and then it really pares things down to the law. The governing board shall create a policy that outlines expectations with language and definitions consistent with Utah code, and it cites every code. I pulled in from the initial draft that it provides an appeal process and lists those things. the initial draft shall publicize, is that language, shall support an institutional level effort to promote attendance, which accommodates HB 400. And then the citation of interfacing per section 53G-8-211. And then it outlines the code in section 2. My LEAs are have given a thumbs up here, and I would like to have the committee consider this as an option that really keeps us consistent, and it keeps the board from going outside what is already in code. And I think it gives our LEAs autonomy. I think it honors what our LEAs have expressed to me that they really want. And so that's that. I hope that I didn't take too much time, Chair. Thank you. And I'm so sorry, I'm still on my phone.
No, that's okay. This is the first I have seen of this motion, this new draft. I don't know if the rest of you have seen that or not. Because of that, I would like to hear from staff. I can see Aspen is on here as well as Tanya. Would one of you be able to speak to this draft and give us some guidance?
I thank you for that opportunity. I'm happy to speak to it, even though I did just also receive it about 15 minutes ago. So I've just been quickly reviewing, and some of the notes on that in the original draft of this and the subsequent drafts prior to this one, it does shift a lot of the language from absenteeism and truancy to like positive promotion of attendance, things along those lines, with some level of support and tiered systems of support for students and families within there. This draft completely removes that positive promotion of that and sticks more with that kind of negative part of just that end reactive spaces to that. In addition, it pulls out any like indication of supports that might be in place for students or things along those lines and families along the way, rather than just sticking with those kind of end elements of compulsory education and truancy, like mediation, which I think kind of speaks to those opening sentences or the opening public comment, which is that idea of we really want to be supportive of both students, families, and teachers within this rule, so that we're able to kind of sustain those lagging indicators of students within our school setting, which is where a lot of that kind of data and process comes from. And this is not staying true to helping to provide that process. And then I also did speak with Granite School District today as well, and went through with their attendance team. And they have actually a very strong tiered system. And so I just wanted to point that out as far as what their pieces are. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a text saying I didn't introduce myself. I'm Aspen Florence. I'm a prevention specialist in the area of attendance. So does that kind of satisfy input on that, as with a very brief interaction I've had with this draft?
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. Board Member Straight.
Yes, I'd like to a substitute motion of draft number 7. And I'd like to speak to that.
Okay. I might need some help with this. Can we take a substitute motion at this point? Chair Moss?
Well, it's a motion to substitute, I guess. We clarified that. I think I was calling it the wrong thing in prior board meetings. So a motion to substitute something else. And I would think so, but I see Brian on and I tend to defer to him for the objective voice here. So I think it's in order, but Brian?
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't see him.
I agree, Chair Moss and Chair Norton, that, yeah, a substitute motion would be in order here, I think.
Okay. All right. So you're bringing forth substitute draft number 7, correct?
Yes.
And would you like to speak to that?
Absolutely. So I was very interested, first of all, by the comments, and actually I've heard some of those comments, but I hadn't seen draft 8, so I'm very, very hesitant to support it. It might be the best thing in the world, but it seems to have been vetted, or at least according to the writer, that's been vetted by everyone but members of the committee. So that's a challenge for me to support it when it might be really good. However, I want to just make certain I did get disconnected a couple times when board member Lair, I have visited with her, but I want to just make certain that those elements of making certain we clarify excused versus unexcused. I know in my district, we have prearranged absences to where if someone goes on a vacation, they can go around to all their teachers. We have excused absences. We have unexcused absences, which unexcused absences are truancies, but truancies only apply to high school and junior high, and they do not apply to the elementary. So I think the burden to develop these policies is placed on the LEAs. And so I think it's Carol Lear's draft does that and gives them the autonomy. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Moss, did you want to speak to this substitute?
I was going to speak to the other one. so
Okay.
hold my hand.
Board Member Bogus, did you want to speak to this substitute?
Yeah, my LEAs are not on board with this substitute. The language that that produces that minimum standard, and then it pairs out in particular line number 54, 55, and 56. They are not on board with this. There is a concern that with this opportunity, a single institution could literally create a policy that alienates kids. So let's say we've got two buildings pretty close to one another, and one's attendance policy is very, very strict, and it will push students into another building with a very lax attendance policy. And then we're in a place where we get inequities, and they're just not on board with this minimum standard policy. I've had a number of people reach out to me, and that this whole, my LEAs want a single LEA policy with support for their schools, and they're just not on board with this, and so I can't support that.
Okay. Next up, we have Vice Chair Davis, and then Chair Moss.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you want to speak to this substitute?
Yes, I'd like to speak to the substitute. I think it's important to note, and I'm trying to get a hold of one of my LEAs that's been mentioned here by member Bogus. I just think it's important in line 52 to 56 to notice that an LEA they can either develop one attendance policy for the LEA itself to use in all of its schools, or it can provide the minimum components that it wants. I'm assuming those would include the provisions of the law, and then give schools some flexibility to add some positive interventions or whatnot, or whatever it is specific to that school under the guidance of the LEA. So I just don't know. I think the LEAs would want more freedom and flexibility rather than less on this, but I would like to amend draft. I move to amend draft 7. I move to unstrike in line 2 the words "and truancy." And I move to add the words in line 18 at the end of the line, at the end of compulsory education guidance, including provisions for excused and unexcused absences.
Do you restate that one more time, Board Member Davis?
Sure. In line 2, removing the strikeout and include add truancy. And in line 18, at the end of the line, adding the words, including provisions for excused and unexcused absences. And I'd like to speak to the motion, Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. I've talked to a lot of people today, and I think that there is a real desire, and as we also heard in public comment, for in our policies to add some provisions for excused and unexcused absences. I think it's important to have this language in our rule because this language is also in laws code that we have that surrounds attendance. And in particular, I think people were really wondering about the 10% definition of chronic absenteeism. And I had to do some digging on this as well. Chronic absenteeism is the word that's used in our code, but the 10% is a metric that's been used since the 90s to create studies, a wide range and variety of studies. And it's also been used by the USBE for the past 7 years to gather data. I think people's real concern is that they don't want that 10% to be just, we're only looking at absenteeism across the board and not understanding that in our code even we have a delineation between excused absences and unexcused absences and provisions for those. I want to make it very clear to the public that my understanding in voting here today, and I'm sorry, I came prepared to vote on draft 7. I'm just trying to read and process draft 8 while I'm listening to public comment and, and get ready to do this. So that's why my brain's been a little scattered. But as far as draft 7 goes, which I came prepared to discuss, I believe that people want some language for unexcused absence and excused absences. That 10% is a metric that we have used. It helps LEAs to know we've got to start looking at this. You can start doing positive interventions. You are not using the 10% as a trigger to trigger punitive actions to parents, like a call to DCFS or a call to the court. There are a variety of interventions and lots of things that have to happen before anything like that is ever even considered. So as a parent, in a case like mine, I have one child that has perfect attendance because he won't miss for anything, not even a family vacation. I have another child who, in order to be herself that she needs to be involved in competitive sports. And we have lots and lots of absences. She keeps her grades up, but we have a lot of absences. And so I think parents that are kind of in a similar situation to mine originally saw this and thought, oh my goodness, at 10%, someone's going to call the court on me or something of that nature. I don't interpret this at all in that way. I want to make that clear to the public. And then striking the line truancy above. I know that we are moving toward a more positive language, but part of the concern, I think, that brought on draft 8, if I'm hearing all the public comment right, is that they want an understanding that there still is a category of truancy, students who choose to truly not attend school, not with parental permission or anything of that nature, and that there is still some distinction there. I realize logistically that creates a little bit of a quandary because you need a definition below. I think that we can work on that before the next big board meeting. But I just, in hearing the people I've spoken with today, I think these are the key concerns that have brought on my amendments that I came prepared for draft 7.
Point of order.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I think actually we're in a place where we have a tertiary amendment here. Since mine was the made motion and there was a motion to substitute, I do believe this is a tertiary amendment and it technically cannot be heard until there's an adoption
There's a
of the
vote.
substitute motion.
Brian?
If I may, this would be the second amendment. It wouldn't be a tertiary amendment. So we're allowed to go 2 amendments out. So the substitution would be the first amendment. This would be the second amendment. So we got to stop right here, but I think this would be appropriate. Tertiary would be 1 more amendment beyond this, which would be improper.
Thank you. Chair Moss?
There we go. Thank you. What I've heard since the last time we heard this in full board meeting was some concern that this creates these teams and requires definitions. It also kind of creates this confluence of excused and unexcused, which I think the proposed amendment from Member Davis addresses. I'm still concerned overall that some of what we're requiring here could instead be addressed in the training that we're required to provide by HB 400. And I won't speak to the motion that has been substituted, I'll just speak to this one. But I think there's, after the feedback I got, there's just too much here and creates potential, even though we've tried to delineate and define, creates the potential for confusion. And I also have heard that the idea of having different policies at different schools could be problematic. I myself at one point had kids in 4 different district schools in Wasatch, and the possibility of variation from school to school is a challenge. So I think the amendment makes it better. I'm still concerned about the underlying motion of version 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus?
I'm so sorry, Chair. Did I leave my hand up?
Okay, not a problem.
I will take it down. Please excuse me.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis, did you have another comment?
Not right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to communicate. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Board Member Straight?
Yes, I keep losing coverage, so hopefully I can stay with you here. But I support the amendments that were made by Board Member Davis. And yeah, I appreciate those amendments. And I think they fit in well with what we heard from public opinion on draft 7. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other hands, the action before us is that the committee approves R277607 draft 7 on first reading and forward to the board for, amended.
Point of order, Chair. I think we need to vote on this amendment, and then we need to vote on the underlying motion.
That's what I just said. I just was catching myself.
Please excuse me. I'm on my phone, and so I'm in and out. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion before the board right now is to amend draft 7 to read on line 2 that we unstrike and truancy. And then on line 18, we add at the end, including provisions for excused and unexcused absences. Board members, would you please vote? That looks like that passes unanimously. All right, so now we go back to the substitute motion from Board Member Straight that the committee approves R277 draft number 7 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Chair, I would move to amend.
Go ahead.
I would move that in line 12, we strike the words and chronic absenteeism, and then strike that definition down below as well. And keep our delineation between excused and unexcused so that we're dealing with things in a realm where there's clarity. And when we conflate those two, there becomes a great lack of clarity. And I'm hearing that from many people today.
Okay, let's get this amendment on there so it it reads the way you'd like it to, Board Member Bacchus. Okay, so on line 12, we're going to strike "and chronic absenteeism." So that would now read, okay, and then on line 15.
Are you asking to delete that term throughout the rule, Board Member Bogus?
Yes. Well, specifically on line 12, and then the definition, I believe, falls on line 33 and 34. And we have Board Member Lair graciously put the citation of that code in there. So we have the link in there. But it just brings us back to a place where things are very clear and things are not conflated.
All right. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I've spent a lot of time on this rule. I spent a lot of time on draft 4, and it looks like a lot of that work made it into Member Lear's draft 7, and I'm thankful for that. This is something that seems to be, I think we all had plenty of communication today that kind of confounded me, but it just seems to be something that is very ill-defined, if you will, because it's conflating things. And for clarity for our parents, clarity for our schools, I don't think we should go beyond the scope of what our legislative code says. Our legislative code is very clear in this area. It's got good definitions in our code, and I think, no, I don't think, it is my opinion that this language would be something that presents a situation where the board has gone too far. We're taking the code and we're taking it one step further instead of honoring the legislative intent. And so I would just offer that based on the feedback that I've received today, this just needs to be removed, please.
Oh, so is the motion also, if I may, Chair, to strike the other 3 references to chronic absenteeism in the rule?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen. I appreciate that, or Director Rasmussen.
Okay, so I first saw Board Member Davis's hand, and then Specialist Aspen Florence's, so we'll go in that order.
Well, I was going to ask actually Specialist Florence, I don't think I'm remembering wrong. I think I read in the code that this is our charge, is to create a rule about chronic absenteeism. Is that the language that was used in the code?
Oh, sorry. May I?
This is for Aspen.
For Aspen Florence?
I believe that's true. Let me pull that up right now while we continue this conversation and just be sure that that's the case.
Can I follow up, Chair?
Yes.
I also don't remember reading in the code that chronic absenteeism was specifically written out in the code as 10%. But I think when it uses the term chronic absenteeism and you just Google it, you're looking at that anyway. It's been used since the 90s, and we could change it. I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm thinking the drafter of the code meant chronic absenteeism, and we've for 7 years used that 10% to gather data. So we maybe could divide the motion here and keep the words chronic absenteeism if it's in the code and that is our charge. I think I read that, but someone verify for me. And then, the 10%, I think if you take that out, it actually removes clarity because that's what's used across the board, but maybe there's some other language. I don't know. I'm thinking on it, but until we figure that out, I would probably, after we hear from Specialist Florist, may move to divide if I can keep my hand up and follow up.
Okay. Okay, Specialist Florence.
Yeah, I believe in line 187 of HB 400, it does directly say that. So it is requiring us to create some type of rule around that. Also, I want to follow up with Board Member Davis's comment around the providing more clarity. So chronic absenteeism is a national used definition for students who miss 10% or more of school. And this is where it gets tricky. It's for excused and unexcused. The thing with chronic absenteeism is it's meant for prevention. It's meant for the idea of, oh, this is a student that may, or family that may needs more support. So that idea of this is something to look at. Now, if it's a student that's keeping their grades up and going to all of their sporting events and still doing really well, then it's okay, like that's not a red flag that we need to worry about. Whereas another student, right, it might be one of those pieces that we do look at and want to provide support for, versus our truancy and compulsory education statute and rule that matches those, which come in with that idea of unexcused absences. And there are other kind of consequential pieces that go in those places. And so I think it's really important to delineate what's being used for prevention and support and what's being used for kind of that correction. And like Board Member Davis said, this is something we were charged to do in HB 400. So I believe just to stay in alignment with the law, we need to ensure that we're following what that looks like.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus. Oh, sorry.
Thank you,
I
Chair.
told Cindy, yeah, just 1 second. I was back to Vice Chair Davis. I told her she could have the follow-up.
Why don't you go ahead to Member Bogus, and then as long as there's not a motion that would mess up the division, and then come back to me for the division, because she may be helpful in information.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Awesome. Thank you, Member Davis. I appreciate you. So I am looking at the code right now, and it does in the code lines are 53G-9-8041A, and it does require that the board adopt a rule, which is the reason we're here. But it says prevention and intervention policies. It does not require us to define that in a way. And as much as we can say, colloquially or universally, we as a board are not bound to definitions outside our body or our agency. And I think that if I have learned anything today, which today was totally crazy, I have learned that our constituents in this state are not comfortable with this definition. I got multiple screenshots of that from one of the drafts. I don't remember which one. That they are not comfortable with this language. And I think if we're going to leave chronic absenteeism in there, then we need to define it as our legislative code defines truancy. And so if the move is to not remove it, but the code does not actually say we have to define it. It says we have to enact a policy that addresses chronic absenteeism, and chronic absenteeism is not defined in code. And I don't think our constituents are comfortable with the definition that has been proposed here. That would be my thought. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, back to you, Vice Chair Davis.
I am really struggling over this, and maybe this is something that we continue to think about with language for the full board. But no, I'm not going to divide. I'm probably not going to vote for this, just because we have to address chronic absenteeism. So the quandary now is, throughout the entire state and nation, chronic absenteeism is seen as anything above the 10%. What we really have to define is making sure, or putting something in this rule that helps us delineate the information and the provisions for unexcused absences and excused absences, because those, quite frankly, should have different scenarios within the LEAs. So I guess I'm just going to still be on pause for a minute while I'm trying to think through this.
Okay, we're going to go with specialist. I think that's director. What are we? Manager, all these titles with Tanya, and then to Aspen. Then I'll come back to you, Vice Chair Davis for one final comment, and then we'll go to a vote.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. And I was actually just going to ask if it would be possible for Aspen to share some of the data so that you can understand the scope of what we're talking about. And again, just a reminder that this definition is in there because it talks about when we need to take action to assist students and families with this issue. It's not saying we're doing away with unexcused absences, we're not doing away with excused absences, or we're lumping them together. It's just a benchmark for schools to know when they need to intervene. And I'm wondering if it would be okay for Aspen to go ahead and share some of that data so you can see the scope of the issue.
Thank you.
Do I have permission? Is
Yes,
that okay?
ma'am.
Okay. Can I actually have a small slide deck? Is that okay if I just share some of the information really quickly? I swear I'll be fast.
That will be good. Thank you.
Can I get permission? I don't know who's in charge, but I can't share my screen.
And you should have permission. We authorized it for anyone. Will you try it again now that it's?
Here we go. Yes, I found it. Okay.
Thank you.
So just really quickly, so I do want to speak to the data, of course, but then also that idea of the delineation between excused and unexcused and what happens when they're not. That is already delineated through that chronic absenteeism doesn't necessarily dictate any type of consequence or doesn't dictate any kind of consequence, whereas our compulsory education and truancy laws do, and those go with unexcused. So it is already delineated and differentiated that way, and there's very clear policy and procedure around when a student's consistently missing school for that is unexcused and what an LEA should do in that space. And so those are listed on here if you want to look. We have a lot of statute that helps delineate those pieces. The other piece that I think Tanya was really bringing up is the idea of why chronic absenteeism is important. So this goes to chronic absenteeism in itself means it helps identify students that aren't reaching like those learning milestones. And actually, oddly enough, a lot of the national chronic absenteeism data comes out of Utah, which is kind of strange. So this is work we've been doing in Utah for a very long time, but you can see here, a public study in Utah found that an incidence of chronic absenteeism in even a single year between the 8th and 12th grade was associated with a 7-fold increase in the likelihood of dropping out. And so that's why that data point of chronic absenteeism is so important, again, for a prevention piece rather than a reaction piece. And that comes straight out of Utah research. But this is what our data currently looks like in Utah. And I think that that's also important to look at. So you can see these are chronic absenteeism rates that for students that missed 10% or more in 2017 and 18. And then in the 2021-22 school year, we saw a significant increase in
Point of information, I'm sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize, Chair. So I'm looking at the document in board backup because I pulled it up as my screen is very small. And on my document, it says that the USBE chronically absent data review is those numbers represent students who have missed 20% or more school because they have attended 80% of the time. That is the number that's on my backup. I just wanted to confirm.
That's a typo on there, Board Member Boggess. So you can see here, this is where it was pulled from. So as it got translated from the actual document into the backup document template, the percentage. So that is students that have missed 10% or more in alignment with that chronic absenteeism data point and national definition. Where I think that got pulled from is you can see that there's a large amount of students that have an IEP that are missing 20% or more. So which is significantly more than even that chronic absenteeism rate. But that is a typo on that document. So I apologize for that.
Okay, I appreciate that, Aspen. Thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So that you can see here, we've seen a large increase that's also happened nationally, and actually nationally, there's a lot of work happening around this because it's almost an educational crisis as it stands. And then this right piece is one of the more important pieces that I see within this data is you can see some of our kind of most at-risk populations are the ones that are experiencing the increase in this to the greatest degree. So you can see our American Indian population, almost half of the students in the 21-22 school year were chronically absent. And like I said on slide 7, you can see kind of what the outcomes. It shows a significant decrease in their ability to access education. It shows a significant decrease in the likelihood that they'll graduate high school. And so you can see why that's a concerning statistic in that point and why it would require some level of intervention. And the rest of what this rule kind of calls out based on that information is just how do we create clear systems that promote attendance rather than just react when there's some of that unexcused absence, non-attendance. And so it goes from really this reaction to we're kind of in a crisis mode to this prevention on, we know that this is something that is really important for educational progression of our students. And with that knowledge, we want to be prepared to be able to promote that. And so you can see, actually, I met with Granite School District, Weaver School District below.
We're going to need to wrap this up.
And it just addresses that policy versus procedure. And you can see here, it already has policy and procedure outlined in different school districts. That's linked here as well to where that basic policy is there. Each school has their individual procedure. And so those are all there, and it addresses the different points that were talked about today. Thank you for my time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. So final round, Vice Chair Davis and then Board Member Bogus.
Okay, thank you. Gosh, I'm not going to vote for this amendment at this moment, especially not the chronic absenteeism language because it's in code, but the 10% maybe, I think later in the rule, when we get to full board, we may have to do some more delineation there. I have some people saying, well, maybe you could do 10% excused and 10% unexcused, 20% excused. But if we do it right in that spot, then I think it becomes more prescriptive and people really will think that's a trigger for, some of these other things that come in the other code. So I think the 10% is just like oh, hey, these folks have missed this much. Maybe we send a letter of awareness and parents go, oh, wow, we've already missed 10. I didn't even realize it's only midterm. Man, I guess we'll go to Disneyland in July instead of January. I didn't realize they were building up so much or whatever. But I think we're going to have to think about it before full board. For now, I'm not going to vote for this, but I do commit to studying the other draft and the language and even more language that may do some more delineation between excused and unexcused later in the rule. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus.
Thank you, Chair. I certainly do appreciate it. I would like to just two things. One is I wanted to ask Aspen if she could email the whole board her slides because I'm on my phone and I just was not able to see that as clearly as some of you. And then also I'm doing math and we really have students missing like 1 point some odd days a month. And we're defining that as chronic and we're saying for any reason, I'm just going to do the math right here. So we have 180 days and if we miss 18, so it doesn't matter. My point is we're just over 1 day a month and we're defining these students as chronically absent. And to me that if it were all without parental knowledge, that I can get on board with, but to conflate the two together, the research just doesn't support that. And I've looked at both sides of this issue. In fact, I looked at the study that I believe Miss, or I'm going to call her Aspen because I cannot remember her last name. Please accept my apologies. I looked at that study and I really found some things that I found a little bit problematic. One is it conflates all these absences, which I get is the point, but we can't really see the point of the study without seeing the disaggregated data. What were the ones that were parentally excused? What was the academic achievement of kids who were chronically absent and excused by their parents? We don't see that data in that study. I get really concerned with the distrust that seems to exist in our state between parents and schools. I do get concerned when we start to shift this language as viewing all absences as suspect, especially when parents get notices in the wintertime. If your kid is not feeling well, keep them home. but if we look at that language is very broad and it's very umbrella language. And if you read it as it's written without any thinking, if a student misses one day in the first 2 weeks of school, they can be deemed chronically absent as that is written. And that's not something I'm comfortable with. It just causes me great consternation. And I think that this language needs to be pulled and studied. And if the full board wants to pull it back in, then that's a conversation we can have at the full board. But at this time, I think it needs to go.
Chair Moss.
I'll be quick. I agree with Chair Davis. I think we need more discussion. I'm going to vote for the amendment because I think we do have still some concern by parents that mixing the two does create the possibility of stigma and blame for parents. It can enhance some of the distrust that I think a lot of this is trying to dissolve. I think that there's a lot of effort going into this that's trying to get past that distrust, but I think it just needs more work to distinguish the two. There are, studies out there that do, peel the two apart, and those excused absences are much less likely to contribute to academic failure. And so I think there's probably a way to address that between here and the full board. So appreciate all the work for it. I'll vote for this, and hopefully we have more discussion.
Okay, Board Member Bogus, did you have your hand up, or does it just
Sure.
remain?
I so appreciate you every time. I need to learn how to use Zoom on my phone. My apologies.
Believe me, I so know. It is a joke. No, it's not a joke. It is a challenge at best on a phone.
Yeah, I do have one question or comment since my hand is up. Is that okay?
Yes.
I've really, I think we all, I didn't expect it, but we were all kind of bombarded today, and I'm left wondering, once a child receives a label, if you will, because even though at schools, I know we try not to, but once we label it, a student and a family as chronically absent, how do they ever shake that? It's just something for, I think, the members to think about. I would offer that I have a student on my class roll, and since I serve in the hundreds of students, I feel comfortable saying they've missed 50 days. And so I don't take this lightly. I really don't. I think that there's good work that schools do, but this language is language I'm really not comfortable with. And so I would just ask for your support in removing this language. And then should the full board choose to bring it back, that would be a decision I think that the full board could entertain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis. You're muted.
Can I amend the amendment? Is it too late? Because we're at a 2-2, Brent is gone, and anything that happens now is going to result in frustration.
I think Brent's trying to reestablish another connection right now. It's what he's telling me.
Well, I'm going to make another motion anyway, just amendment. I like to amend the amendment that the 10% is temporarily removed and brought back as an option with another option of a definition that incorporates some language with excused and unexcused absences to the full board. And that would be a direction for staff to bring back those two choices for the full board.
Okay, AAG Quisenberry.
Is the substitute motion still on the floor?
Yes.
If so, then we already have the existing amendment to that substitute motion. So then Vice Chair Davis's would be an amendment to a substitution. That would be tertiary. And so I don't think this proposed amendment would be proper right now.
Okay. We have heard that we cannot take that motion right now.
Okay.
Chair, may I?
Yes.
If it's a,
and then we are going to vote after this.
Yes, Chair. So if Member Davis would be okay, I would be amenable to perhaps frame the language in my motion to say that we strike this and direct staff to do what she has asked to do, and that will prevent prevent the tertiary amendment or whatever we're looking at.
May I respond, Chair?
Well, let me find out from, okay, yes, go ahead.
Would you be willing, Member Bogus, to write it like this? And the reason that I think we need to also talk to the bill sponsors, and I think we also need to just look at absenteeism. I don't think the words chronic absenteeism is the problem, and I don't think LEAs will go out and say, now you're a chronic absentee person. I think the 10% helps them to become aware, and then they will need to start looking at excused, unexcused, what do we do for which, what do our policies want to look like? So I don't know for sure if there can be an alternative definition to chronic absenteeism because it's so widely known as 10% of both. But what we do with that, I think, needs to look different on the ground. Does that make sense? So I don't know if you'd consider leaving something like this, and maybe it's not the definition, but it's what we do.
So Vice Chair Davis?
Yes.
May I address her, Chair?
Yes.
I have to be really honest with you. I'm looking at this on my phone and I cannot see it well enough to give you an affirmative on that.
Okay. Let me just speak it out. Would a friendly amendment be to temporarily remove the 10% and then bring back a new definition and or more of a direction of what will happen if the absences are excused or unexcused?
Chair.
Or at least a direction for LEAs to just look at those two and see how they're going to respond to those differently.
Let's listen to Director Rasmussen.
Ben Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices. I don't think I introduced myself before. But just to point out that the friendly amendment that Vice Chair Davis is proposing doesn't work from a rule writing standpoint because the motion is to strike all references to chronic absenteeism in the rule. So we can't have a definition for a term in the rule unless we use the other terms and use the term elsewhere in the rule. So that definition, that friendly amendment wouldn't work if you're going to strike all the other references in the rule. Just wanted to point that out from a rule writing standpoint.
So we need to divide the question. We're really talking about the 10% here. Correct? Sharon,
So
how you see it?
I apologize.
So
Let's go to Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. Just as a point of information, I just want to clarify that when we're talking about 10%, we're talking about 10% of the days that the student is enrolled and that school is in session. So we're not making a calculation based on, months or like we're missing one day a month or things like that. We're making a calculation based on the total amount of school. So what we're saying is that if a student attends less than 90% of the days that they're enrolled, that is when we start to provide interventions and services to the families and student to help understand the issue and help improve their attendance. That's all I wanted to make sure that I just clarified that.
may I follow up with her, Chair Norton?
Where are we? I need help with that right now first.
I think we're still discussing whether or not
we can have, and that's what I need to know, whether or not we can have any more motions, because I don't think we can have this motion.
I don't think so either. And I was trying to maybe change my motion a little bit. I would like it removed with the caveat that we direct staff to move with bringing maybe perhaps a proposed amendment that would encompass Member Davis's concerns.
But we can't have another amendment right now. We need to vote on your amendment to strike all references to chronic absenteeism.
That's correct.
Can we divide, Chair?
I think you can divide, yes.
Okay, I move to divide.
And what are we dividing?
So we're dividing the first piece, striking all the words chronic absenteeism from the rule. That's her first piece. And then the second piece is the definition of chronic absenteeism as 10%.
Fair. That still raises the same issue that I pointed
Brought
out
up before. Yeah,
because if you're going to keep the definition of chronic absenteeism, there would have to be another reference in the rule to chronic absenteeism.
But the motion to divide is to keep all the chronic absenteeisms in the rule.
The motion is to strike them. So if you're
But the-
dividing, so you'd be
Right, so
amending
if you vote no, we'd keep all the references to chronic absenteeism as required in the code. Is that correct?
I think you have to make that motion in succession, Cindy, after, if that passes or fails.
But I want to divide. Because I want to amend I can't vote for one. If you have to vote no, then across the board. Because we're required to do this in law.
That's what I.
So, point of information, the law does not say we have to provide a definition. It says we have to enact policies that address the issue.
That's why I want to divide. But it looks like I can't, so I guess we vote.
let's go back and vote on Board Member Boggess's amendment for draft 7. So the motion before the board is to strike all references to chronic absenteeism in the rule, including the definitions on line 30 through 34. Board members, please vote.
Chair, I'm a yes. I think I got that.
So we have a split, which means that is a no.
I'm a no.
Oh, and there's board member Straight. Fails 3-2. Okay, then we go up to Vice Chair, sorry, we've already voted on that one. Okay, so now we go back to the original substitute motion that the committee approves R277-607 draft 7 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Chair, I would move to amend.
Go ahead.
I would move to amend, striking the words emotions and from line 28. Mental health from line 30.
Yes.
Striking the definition of mental health in lines 36 and 37. And that would conclude my motion. And
Would you like
I
to speak to it? Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, ma'am. So, and I do appreciate it. I'm going to read it. Behaviors are very clear, and I like what Member Lear has done here. I think there's a lot of benefits from it. I do think it is a better definition than was previously there. I do like its succinctness. However, behaviors that affect well-being are not emotions. Behaviors are things like sleeping habits, substance abuse, even lack of exercise. And so I don't think that those things belong because they're not behaviors. And so I would just move to strike them because they're not behaviors.
Hey, Vice Chair Davis.
Well, I have another amendment, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this one. So are you talking about line 25 through 30 something? And I'm just trying to read it in context of what it would look like. I didn't love the first definition. I don't know about the second. I'm trying to wrap my head around the third.
So my reference, oh, I apologize, Chair, may I address Vice Chair Davis?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So in line 25, it says behavioral health means.
Yeah.
And then in line 28, after the red has been struck, it says the emotions and behaviors that affect student well-being. Well, emotions are not behaviors. So if we're discussing behavioral health, we're talking about good sleeping habits. We're talking about making sure we're eating well. We're talking about not playing our stuff until the middle of the night, or video games or whatever. We're talking about good tech habits. So behavioral health is very different from emotions, and emotions are just not behaviors. Sometimes our emotions cause manifested behaviors, but emotions are not behaviors. And mental health is not a behavior either. Does that make sense, Vice Chair Davis?
Yes, but Chair Norton, don't hate me. I don't see any other hands, but I need to divide again. But you have staff hand up.
Tanya?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Tanya Albornoz, Coordinator for Prevention and Student Services. That term, behavioral health, is used widely as an umbrella term to mean both behaviors as well as mental health issues. And in terms of this rule, really what it's saying is that that is one of the reasons that parents can excuse students from school. So it's just saying we're including mental health related issues, substance abuse related issues, and healthy eating and sleeping habits, and those types of behaviors under the umbrella of reasons why parents can excuse students from school.
Vice Chair Davis.
I move to divide.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I would move to divide the emotions and then the mental health, and I'd like to speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I fully support in line 28 removing emotions, because I just do think behavioral health are the behaviors that affect student well-being. And then down on 30, I would move to keep that one, because these behaviors can impact mental health, substance abuse, healthy eating and sleeping habits. And, you know, those are things that we may be valid. I hate the word valid excuses that I think is in code, but that's what it is. And there are a lot of things that are valid, and we need to make sure that we honor those with parents as well.
Okay, Board Member Bogus.
Am I voting, Chair? I apologize.
No,
I'm paying
I
attention.
didn't know if you wanted to speak to this or.
Oh, ma'am, I'm
You know
so
what?
sorry. Is my hand still up?
Yeah, that's
And I'm
okay, but it's
sorry.
down now, and we're going to
Point of
vote.
order, I messed up. We should have voted to divide before I spoke to it.
Right.
Sorry.
That's what I was just gonna
my
say.
bad.
We're voting now to divide the motion.
I would vote to divide. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If that is what you are calling on me for.
Well, I was calling on you because your hand was up, but now we are voting, so we now know that you want to divide. So Chair Moss, did you have you're voting? Okay. So it looks like that passes unanimously, that motion to divide. Now, Chair Moss, did you want to make a comment?
No, sorry, hit the wrong
Okay.
button. Thank you.
All right, so now Cindy, do you want to speak to your motion?
No, I just did.
Okay. Then the motion before the board is, the first motion of the division is to strike emotions and on line 28. Board members, go ahead and please vote. That passes unanimously. The second motion, strike mental health on line 30 and definitions on line 36 and 37. Board members, please vote. And that fails 3 votes to 1. And that takes us back to our original motion. Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am. I would move to amend draft 7 in, and I apologize, I'm looking at it here. In line number 54, 55, and 56. I would move to strike those and replace them with the language in line 53, an LEA shall develop an attendance policy. And then, and I hope for whoever's running that computer, and then I would move to strike the language or schools in line 71, 77, 85, 91, 114, 119, 123, 124, 146.
And did you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. So this is just something that my in particular, one of my LEAs is just not on board with. I've spoken with many LEA heads. They're not on board with this, and my constituents as well have voiced concern. I think one of the biggest issues I see is the lack of consistency. If a parent has a child in multiple schools, or sometimes, I mean, this is Utah, sometimes 3 schools, elementary, junior high, and high school. And if they all have different attendance policies, we're going to end up in a place where we have conflict, where we have confusion. I think we're also going to end up in a place where, like I said earlier, we have an issue of what could be considered equity, if you will, where a school could create a policy that alienates students and actually, dare I say, gets rid of them. And then they end up in a school with a more lax attendance policy, and then all of the kids who have chronic attendance issues are going to end up in a singular building. In particular, my conversations with Granite School District indicate that this is not something they're in favor of, and so I would move to strike that language. Thank you, ma'am.
Staff Member Rasmussen.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify with Board Member Bogus.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify with Board Member Bogus how she wants line 53 to read. Do I have it correctly on the screen? An LEA may develop an attendance policy, or should that be shall?
It should be shall, sir. Thank you for the clarification, Director Rasmussen. I appreciate you.
Specialist Florence.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak quickly to that. So I believe that the way that draft 7 reads is that an LEU will create a basic policy and then the schools can create additional policy or procedure around that. And I think actually this speaks to a conversation board member Bogus and I had a couple weeks ago regarding 2 different schools in the district that had very significant or very different needs in that space. So the LEA being able to provide those basic outlines that keep them in alignment with the law and consistent codes and expectations that way, with the school being able to complete different procedure, like how do you check your student in at this school? And it is different. I have an elementary, junior high, and high school student, and every check-in is different. An 18-year-old checking in versus a 7-year-old is very different. How do you check them out? What does makeup work look like? Things along those lines. So that's the differentiation between the schools, whereas the clear overarching law abiding pieces would live with the LEA to keep the schools in alignment. So I did want to speak to what that means and the autonomy that gives each school to meet their student population without being outside of the law. And I think, like I said, it was actually a board member, Bogus, that had said, I have 2 very separate schools and they need autonomy to be able to choose how they help meet the needs of their students.
Thank you. And I wanted to speak on this as well. I spent quite a bit of time with numerous principals from larger districts who said they also were appreciative of that opportunity to make some modifications as necessary for their particular school. It allowed them to go out and work with individual parents and help find out what those parents' needs were. Because, you know, in the larger LEAs, there are a variety of different schools with a variety of different cultures and a variety of different circumstances. And it's very helpful in large LEAs to be able to go in and modify as needed to best meet parents' needs and to best still meet the code. Board Member Bogus, your hand is up. Did you want to speak?
I do, but I did forget to take it down, Chair Norton. I apologize.
That's okay. Go ahead. I
So
was reading your mind.
you are reading my mind today. Thank you, ma'am. I agree with you. Schools have unique cultures, and when I first met with Aspen and Director Rasmussen, we really worked hard on creating that chasm so that we keep that the unique and the niche cultures in mind. But the procedural stuff I don't have an issue with. The policy and the minimum standard I do have an issue with, and my LEAs are not well, one of my LEAs is not behind that language, and I just can't support it. I think that the unique niche work can be done without providing the opportunity to have multiple policies within a district. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I'm probably going to vote no on this amendment because the LEA has the flexibility to either have its own policy or create a minimum set of components that align with the law and what have you, and give some flexibility to the schools if they need some individual different interventions. And they can incorporate into their policy that they then want to see a final draft and approve any final draft of an individual school's policy. I've been visiting with a member of leadership in Jordan who just says more flexibility is better for LEAs, but it's nice to also be able to see a final draft or to have the final say on something, and they could build that into their own policy since they have full opportunity to decide flexibility.
Okay.
Can I just add one quick thing? I went to a meeting for alternative school students. There were students there from Jordan, Wasatch, North, somewhere in the North, I can't even remember, Roots, Charter. I mean, it was really interesting that those leader said, some of these kids, a lot of these kids work till 1 a.m. every day. And we're just trying to figure out ways how to make it work. And an attendance policy that works at one school isn't always necessarily going to exactly work at another. I think we need to provide some flexibility there.
Chair Norton. Oh, sorry.
Specialist Flores, you were next.
Yeah, sorry, just as it reads right now, it says an LEA may develop one attendance policy for the LEA. So that would be the one piece, or provide a policy with minimal standards to the LEA schools and require the schools to develop individual procedures. So it's not even calling out that the schools are creating their own policy. It's indicating they either create a comprehensive policy as an LEA or create a minimum policy as an LEA and have schools create procedures around that policy as it reads in draft 7. So I think it's clearly covering what's being asked as it stands right there as far as LEA directed policy, school-based procedure.
Thank you. Board Member Bogus.
I don't recall what I was going to say, Chair. I apologize. I'm lowering my
Okay.
hand.
Let's go ahead and then vote. The motion before the board is to amend draft 7, that the committee strike lines 54 through 56 and amend line 53 to read an LEA shall develop an attendance policy. Strike or schools throughout the rule. Board members, go ahead and please vote. That fails 3-1. And we are back to our original substitute motion that the committee approves
No. I want
R277.
to amend. Sorry.
Excuse me?
Sorry, I have my hand up to amend.
Okay.
Oh, wait, did I mishear you? We're back to the original motion to pass the whole thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I definitely want to amend.
Go ahead.
Okay, let me find on the line where it says the 10%. Trying to find which
Line 33, I
33
believe.
and 34.
Yeah, okay, it was just taking a second for it to load. Thank you. On line 33, I want to add the words at the end of line 44. The words and makes school aware that a beginning of tiered supports may be needed. And I'd like to speak to the motion.
Go ahead.
I think this preserves the holistically understood definition of chronic absenteeism across all the stakeholders. But everyone keeps saying, but it's not a trigger to do punitive things. It's a beginning of supports. Well, then if that's the case for Utah purposes, to add clarity, let's say it. Let's just say what we mean right there in the definition. And if people have problems with it, they can come back and change it in the full board meeting. But at least we'll nip this misconception in the bud that's floating around out there that if your kid is absent once every 2 weeks or sick or something, that you're going to get DCFS called on you, because that is not the case. So let's make this clear.
Board Member Bogus, did you want to speak to this motion?
No, ma'am, I have another amendment.
Okay.
I would, at this time, though, I would say that I would support this motion because I do believe that we need much more clarity in that. So thank you, Member Davis, for bringing this forward.
All right, let's go ahead and vote, board members. The motion before the board is to amend draft 7 that the committee add at the end of line 34 and makes a school aware that a beginning of tiered supports may be needed. Board members, go ahead and please vote. That passes unanimously. Board Member Bogus, you said you had a motion.
Yes, ma'am. So in line number, I apologize, I went back up to that line and I lost it. So in line, I apologize, Chair.
Hey, I know
Um,
you're working with one arm tied behind your back, so.
What language are you looking for, Board Member Box?
Oh, I am looking actually at lines 44 and 45. I would move to strike lines 44 and 45. Just for clarity's sake, if it doesn't mean that, we just won't put it there. And it streamlines the rule and it provides, it just like, again, going back to clarity, let's not open the doors to anything. Punitive action means notice of truancy, notice of compulsory ed. And let's get rid of that language so that there's nothing to conflate.
Okay, seeing no other hands, board members, if you'll take your original votes down and let's start fresh. The amendment, the motion before the board is to amend draft 7 to strike lines 44 and 45. Go ahead and please vote. I don't see your vote, Board Member Davis. Okay, that fails 3 votes to 1. And now we go back to the substitute motion. Okay, the substitute motion is that the committee approves R277-607 draft 7 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Board members, please vote. That fails 2 to 2. So that takes us back to the original motion, Board Member Bogus's motion that the committee approves R277-607 draft 8 on first reading and forwards to the board for approval on second and final reading. Board members, please vote.
Wait, point of order.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I thought we were voting on draft 7. Why are we going back to vote on draft 8? That was the first motion.
Board 7 just failed. I mean, substitute motion just failed 2 to 2.
I did not realize. I thought we were voting. Okay. I was a yes on that.
Yeah, you were yes and I was yes. Moss and Bogus were no's.
Oh. Okay. Then we're on draft 8.
Yep, we're on draft 8.
So Chair, I would be happy to speak to this unless someone else would like to speak.
Go ahead.
So
And will you
I
take
did-
your vote down?
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate the reminder.
Oh.
Thank you
No,
so
it's just
much.
helping us keep track of where we are. All right, so now please speak to that motion.
So I just would go back to, this was not any crazy thing. I did email it to the committee at or about 3 o'clock this afternoon. I was really genuinely waiting for my my constituents to get back to me. It was not something I was going to put forward unless my LEA support came behind it. I think all of the things that we've been asking for in draft 8, it accommodates the ability of local schools to engage procedures. It allows the mitigation. It just allows the LEAs to create a policy, in particular line 19, defining attendance expectations, delineating consequences, and consistent with legislative code and providing an appeals process. It addresses all the code lines that we see coming out of HB 400. It addresses the code lines in HB 400 in line 47, or not 47, I apologize, line 37. It also brings that back in line 50, and I believe also in line 52. I could be incorrect on line 52, but it encompasses those code lines. It clearly references them. And I think we just have a very pared down thing, Christina, I just said my own name, a very pared down rule here. And I'm happy to read it if you would like me to, but that is my thought. Is there a shared screen where we can look at that?
Your draft is on the screen, Board Member Boggs.
Thank you, Director Rasmussen. I appreciate it. So this is, like I said, it's work that came out of a lot of arduous hours with fellow board members and also my LEAs. Starting in line 35, it says an LEA governing board shall create and review an LEA attendance policy. Can we go there? It just provides explicit clarity. It references code lines, and then it gives that local LEA and our individual schools the opportunity to operate consistent with Utah code, which in this situation is very, very clear. So I would just offer it for the committee's consideration and possible amendments.
Vice Chair Davis.
I'd like to make a substitute motion, and I don't know if it's in order or not, so someone will have to tell me if I'm out of it. I move that the committee put forward both draft 7 and draft 8 to the full board, because I think that we got this draft at the beginning of the meeting, and I have not had time to study it or vet it. I haven't had time to have LEAs weigh in. I don't think it covers all of HB 400 from what I'm hearing. I think we need time on both of these, and I think we should send both of them forward.
I would move to amend the motion.
Let's hear from Chair Moss first.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think I would support presenting both if they're up for discussion. I'll defer though to Member Boggs to speak.
Go ahead, Board Member Boggs.
I would just move to amend. If the motion is deemed in order, I would move to amend it to say draft 7 is amended.
AAG Quisenberry.
Yes, I believe that Vice Chair Davis is substituting the main motion, which is draft 8. So I believe her motion is in order.
I had already put that in the motion for Board Member Davis I assumed that that was what she meant when she said, so that's the language on the screen. I don't know if you need a motion to amend to do that unless Vice Chair Davis is asking only to put the unamended version forward.
No, I'd like the amended version put forward, please.
Okay,
I just, in fairness, we need time.
all right. So the motion before the board is a substitute motion that the committee put forward draft 7 as amended and draft 8 for review by the full board. Board members, please vote. That passes 3 votes to 1. Okay, and we are on to agenda item 1.3, the fiscal year budget formulation process for 2024 general session of the Utah Legislature. Great. The committee action for the board, should they choose to put this forth, is that the committee recommends that the board direct staff to develop one comprehensive legislative request for the 2024 legislative session that includes all potential RESA funding and policy requests together. And that was a motion that I made, and I would like to speak to my motion. A couple of months ago, we had the RESA directors in talking with us, and as a group, we then passed their request, but we also, there was a motion made at that time that we look at how we present RESA budgetary information going forward, and we felt that it would be advantageous to both USBE and the RESAs and the LEAs involved to combine that into one comprehensive motion, so that we are not dividing and fracturing on this one issue, and it would eliminate some of the confusion that may have been part of our issue last year.
Member Norton?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question for clarification for myself. And so I'm not certain to whom I should direct the question. Is that you, ma'am?
Probably. We'll see. I might send it right down the road too.
Okay, so as I'm reading this and as I reviewed it, I just had some consternation about including them in a single policy request as opposed to breaking them out, because we could lose them all. And I think maybe what I should do is ask a question. Is it a possibility that they could reject all the funding requests if we put them together in a single request?
Is Deputy Superintendent Stallings or Jones available to answer that question?
Both of them are available, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent Policy. I'm just thinking through the question. I am not as familiar about each of the individual RESA requests, but I do know as a strategy of sorts that we've done in the past is to combine. So for example, when we talk about our FTE requests, I'm talking about USBE's FTE requests or market-based increases. Instead of talking about each position separately, we have combined them into one comprehensive request. So I could see this as analogous to what Board Member Norton is proposing here, because often these RESA requests are quite small in dollar size. The dollar amounts are very small. And so if you're looking at like $100,000 funding request, it's much less likely to make it into the board's top 10 versus more comprehensive with all the dollar amounts together. So as staff worked with Board Member Norton on this motion, I believe part of it was because they are such small dollar amounts to combine them so that to get you take care of many needs in one motion. But I would also defer to Deputy Jones or Chief of Staff Young or others who have been working more directly with the RESAs on their request and recommendation.
Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, Utah State Board of Education. So I agree with Angie. And I believe Board Member Bogus's question that I'm trying to address through you, Madam Chair, was specific to the RESAs, but overall we've had pretty good success with getting funding with our request for funding that have combined things, case in point, market adjustments. Now we don't necessarily get all of the funding we request for that, but her question was, well, is there a risk that we'll lose it all? We do it. What we've seen is a pattern by the legislature where, and staff are very good here about ensuring that when we send a funding request up, they have all the pieces and parts of that funding request put out in front of them. We have a pretty good transition to fiscal note processes. So ultimately it does result sometimes though in, say we ask for 8 million as part of an overall request for funding, they may give us 6 million, or we've seen that in the past with when we bundle, if you will, all the FTEs. Like last year we requested X amount of FTEs, we didn't get that one, but the year before when we did request FTEs, they gave us 2 or 3. Those types of things do happen. However, what we've been told in the past by both the GOPB and the legislatures, they actually appreciate where there's kind of a common theme. So here it's RESAs, right? If there's a common theme, it's in one line item, so to speak. They do appreciate us consolidating as much as possible into one request for funding. So, Madam Chair, does that answer Board Member Bogus's question?
Board Member Bogus.
Yes, ma'am, that does answer my question. And Superintendent Jones, I'm sorry we were not able to connect. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the motion. I actually called them last winter and suggested this because of the format that we have. I think Member Bogus brings up a great question. Like, man, well, could it look too big and then could they all get denied? And I think that is a concern. But on the front end of that, we are limited to this rank order choice thing of our priorities. And really, it was hard going, man, I am a supporter of RESAs, but I got like 30 other things I need to support too. And I can't put 2 of those in the top 10 priorities. So I think it just helps it streamline a little better for board members to use in prioritization.
Thank you. And this will be fleshed out more as staff continues to work on it, as was the procedure that we outlined. Board Member Bogus, did you want to make an additional comment?
No, ma'am, and I apologize again. I am going to get better at this.
Oh, that's fine. Maybe I'll just, well, if you need to ask something, maybe we'll just use your voice, then we'll be okay. Okay.
I will say, excuse me, Chair, is that okay with you?
That's great. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
So the motion before the board is that the committee recommends the board direct staff to develop one comprehensive legislative request for the 2024 legislative session that includes all potential RESA funding and policy requests together. Board members, please vote. That passes unanimously. A second motion is that the committee recommends, this is another one that I propose, that the committee recommends the board direct staff to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to address the San Juan broadband project needs. Back during, and I'm going to speak to my motion.
Point of information, Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this next on the agenda? Maybe I clicked
This
the
is
wrong link.
all 1.3.
Oh, this is within the other action item. Is that
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say? Thank you,
Yes,
because
these are
I don't.
all, right, these are all under the 2025 budget formulation process.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So the San Juan broadband project was instituted during the COVID time because there was little to no internet in the homes on the Navajo Nation. With a great deal of collaboration, USBE in conjunction with San Juan County, San Juan School District, UTEN, many other entities, was able to bring towers to many homes. And I know members of the Navajo Nations traded houses in if they were in a house that had broadband and a student was somewhere else that they couldn't. I mean, they went to great extents to make sure that these students had their education. It has been up to this point, what is the word? My brain just went. It has been maintained and taken care of by the COVID money over the last couple of years, but that money will run out this year. They right now they are working on a variety of different ways to meet that. San Juan has given us a potential a budget of $500,000. We may bundle that together. We'll have to see where that part goes. But right now, the request is that we help San Juan continue to provide internet service onto the Navajo Nation for the San Juan broadband project needs.
Chair Norton?
Yes, ma'am.
Perhaps I don't understand, so I have a question. Is this the proper role of the USBE, putting internet in people's homes? I'm wondering, genuinely wondering, is this business we should be getting into?
It's not a business we're getting into. It's a business that we are already in.
Okay.
But who would like to address that situation? Thank you, Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief of Staff Sarah Young. I'm happy to address the question. So during the COVID pandemic, the state legislature passed the appropriation of funding to San Juan School District for the explicit intent to be able to build out the broadband system. It was one-time funding. And so that system was authorized by the state legislature, and they awarded that money through the State Board of Education, specific to then working with San Juan on the project.
May I follow up, Chair?
Of course.
Okay, so for clarity, this is extending one-time funding?
If I may, Chair?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So the one-time funding has been exhausted, and the project needs additional funding to be able to continue to address the ongoing maintenance needs, as well as the need to be able to move oftentimes some of the equipment to be able to address the changing nature of where students may live within the reservation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair Moss.
Thank you. I think I just missed the number. Could you, what would be the total ask on this one to extend?
Well, right now we have not come right down to that final formulation of money, because there are some other things in play with federal funds and other options. We'll see where that goes. But right now, to develop this project, to maintain this project each year is $500,000. Okay, seeing no other hands, board members, the motion before the board is that the committee recommends the board direct staff to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to address the San Juan broadband project needs. Board members, please vote. That motion passes 3-1. Okay, third motion. That the committee recommends that the board direct staff to develop a legislative request for the 2024 legislative session to address the SOEP program needs. With SOEP, there is funding set aside for different SOEP users. As we saw last month, there was money left over in one pot, and we'll go to a different pot. We also have the change that 215 is going to bring in. So we are just looking at developing a way to reappropriate the funding to best meet the needs of the students of the state of Utah.
Thing of information, Chair.
Yes.
I don't know that we've duly noticed these. I'm not finding them in Civic Clerk, and so perhaps maybe someone can give me some guidance there. But it seems like we're voting on things that have not been duly noticed, and maybe it's just that I'm unable to find them. I've refreshed, I've re-logged in, and I'm just not finding them. I apologize.
Deputy Superintendent Jones, do you want to address this with the actual action item?
Yeah, so when the and Cami can correct me if I'm wrong, and then we might need to go to Brian on this. When we published the agenda, there was the motion in there, the action that was to take place. My understanding is that's really all you need, because then from there, committee members or board members can make motions for the action that's covered by way of the fact that we announced to the public that we were doing a fiscal year 2025 budget formulation process for 2024 general session of the Utah legislature. So all the motions that are being made are well within the, for lack of a better term, umbrella of 1.3, which is an action item. So again, it was publicly noticed, and now board members have the opportunity to do just what you're doing, is to make motions that support that action item, so that, you know, because what you're doing is you're formulating requests for funding, which ties into 1.3, and the law, which is displayed right now, which is the Budgetary Procedures Act, that, you know, you're meeting the Budgetary Procedures Act, all referred in the agenda item, all in the backups. Everything is well within place for this process where board members can take motions. Additionally, the board's communications, Kelsey James sent out an email offering any board member to provide input or motions to this agenda item. So maybe we need, you know, some additional Madam Chair input from Brian, but by all intents and purposes, I don't think board members have to notice motions that they make. I think this was done accordingly to preparing for this meeting, but it's not necessary to list out all the motions that could come or are proposed. So
Vice Chair Norton, I concur with Scott. OPMA just requires reasonable notice, does not require actual motions be crafted and submitted ahead of time for the public to view.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Madam Chair, may I?
Yes.
I guess as you're making these motions, I don't see any information. And so it's hard for me to to really cogitate and make an informed decision when I just have the motion and not the background information. Does that make sense?
Yes, we're just directing staff at this point. You'll see the backup when they come with the legislative request.
Okay, I appreciate you, Chair Norton, and thank you for explaining that, gentlemen. I do appreciate you as well.
Thanks. Vice Chair Davis?
Yeah, well, just to quickly reiterate, so these will all come back to us once they're fleshed out with the information. It's just an ask to have them become fleshed out. I am sorry to do discovery in a meeting and ask a question about technicalities. I really am sorry, but can you just tell me quickly, I should have asked beforehand, is this the entire SOEP program, or is it the state SOEP only, or the private homeschool portion, private homeschool small school portion only?
Private homeschool small school.
Okay. Is the other, sorry, may I follow up?
Yes.
Is the other SOEP program, I mean, do we need to look at that as well? I mean, are there any fluctuations there that we need to be aware of or needs that we need to address?
That other is in the WPU, correct, Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I understand Board Member Davis's question correctly, she is referring to the WPU side of it, so to speak.
So is that
that's going to be in my next one.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just let you go to your next one. Okay. Thanks.
Chair Moss.
I just had a process question. I'll wait until you're done with the motions.
Okay. So I move that we need to vote on this. Again, that the committee recommends that the board direct staff to develop legislative requests for the 2024 legislative session to address SOEP program needs. That passes 3-1. Okay, and my final motion in this area, but there are others, is that the committee recommends that the board direct staff to conduct analysis on potential percentage increases to the value of the WPU during the 2024 general session so that the board may determine what percentage increase to propose. Direct staff.
Sorry, Board Member Norton, I'm just checking to see if this motion was already in our motion doc and I missed it. Do you have that, what you're reading from, that you could send me?
I can get it sent over in just a few moments.
Even if it's just by text is fine as well.
Okay, here it goes. Okay, that is on its way to you. And I will just quickly speak to this, that again, this is directing staff to do analysis work on WPU value. Deputy Superintendent Jones, would you like to finish that off?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. There's, as we progress together and move together to what ultimately becomes a board directed request for funding, to meet the law, to go in front of the governor's office. It's imperative that staff at the board's direction conduct analysis on the WPU As you know, for example, there's a component called an inflationary adjustment to it. It's not really complicated, but it's a value add so that board members know percentage increase type math or dynamics with the value of the WPU, so that you as the board again can direct what percentage increase you would like to see from the legislature. We do it in a parallel efforts with the JLC, who, you know, typically last part of August comes to terms on what their recommendation is for an increase to the value of the WPU. So giving staff as much time as possible is optimal for us to provide you as much data and information on the value of the WPU and the increases of the percentages. So it would really help us if the board, and we never presume anything, if the board directs this or you know, adopts your recommendation, and not just this, but these other motions as well, really give staff a good amount of time. The rest of June, July, the board doesn't meet in July, and it really helps us prepare again to support you as the board making the direction of what requests for funding you want to make. So, and we all know how critical and essential coming to terms with what we recommend the percentage value to the WPU be increased by is an essential piece of any year, any general session, any funding proposal. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay, and I understand that there are more motions. Do you show those? Member Moss, Board Chair Moss, did you have one?
A motion, yes. Let's see, and that's got it up there.
Okay.
Let me just read it and make sure.
I apologize, Board Member Norton. Did you vote on this one and I just missed?
You're right. We did not.
Okay.
Let's do that. Thank you. Okay. So the motion that we are voting on now is that the committee recommends the board direct staff to conduct analysis on potential percentage increases to the value of the WPU during the 2024 general session, so the board may determine what percentage increase to propose. Board members, please vote. That passes unanimously. Okay, Chair Moss, did that look okay?
I think so. Let me just check here. Yeah, well, maybe I can bring the motion and then address it for potential amendment, if that's all right. So my motion is that the committee recommended the board request staff to identify potential funding request ideas, including the estimated proposed funding amounts related to the ideas for the board's consideration in August. In my discussion to this would be that last year, I think we had, well, I know we had some version of this that we tried to implement. And I think it went slightly askew from the original intent in that every single idea that was identified was requested for a full business case. And not all of those, of course, were moved by board members into this, votes to be on the list or in the top 10 of the list. So what I think some of us understood last year that I'm suggesting we try again is that staff work up a list with the basic information from which the board could vote to take any one of those or more and vote to request a full business case to be worked up, which we would then vote on whether to approve, having seen the business case. So I'm seeing this as a two-step process that invites our staff participation, does not necessarily result in all of those ideas being moved straight to a vote, or straight to a business case, but allows some review and a two-step filtering process so that to the extent staff are thinking about things or hearing about things that we may not be hearing about, they at least get elevated for that board review and two-step process.
Hey, Vice Chair Davis.
well, I have my own, but I'm just have a question on this. I assume this would include, like it did last year, a continuation of or a reintroduction, if it wasn't funded, the board's priorities from last year, correct?
I would, can I chair?
Yes, sir.
I think that's also an idea that has merit. I think it's separate here. I would see those that were proposed last year may or may not have come from staff. They may have come from staff or may have come from board members. So I
So
would
you're making a second motion?
No, I'm not. So I guess I would distinguish this from that. I think this would simply be asking staff to identify ideas, bring them forward for the board to think about. They may be something from last year. They may be something new that they're hearing about that we have not heard about. So
for clarity, members need to bring their own if they had some pet thing from last year. Okay, thanks.
that would be my thought. I guess that's just outside this particular motion though. Yeah.
Okay, seeing no other hands, board members, please vote. That passes unanimously.
I think there's one no.
Oh, there was one no? Yes, there is one no. There is one no. 3-1. Okay, Board Member Davis.
I'm going to speak to the agenda item and not make a motion. I just want committee members to be aware that this agenda item will continue to come back to us for the next few meetings as we continue to look toward the next legislative session. And I want to just put a bug in your ear that we may bring forward a motion, or I may bring forward a motion once we get the Wested study results back on special education. I'm hearing LEAs large and small express frustration. Special ed needs and costs are rising, and they're saying we need to look at funding a bit differently. So I look forward to the information that they bring forward. We'll see where it goes, but we may have something to do with special education coming up in one of these future meetings, and just want that to put a bug in your ear.
Thank you so much. Good point. Chair Moss.
Just one more quick process question. Is finance going to be having this item on the agenda in our finance meeting on June 2nd as well? Or will this be the only time it comes to finance? From here on, it goes to the full board.
Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Madam Chair, so Chief of Staff Young is with us on this. So if you recall last year, we involved her and well as implementation director. What we did really is from the May meeting, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the May meeting, we did what we're doing now, right? Then it went to the board in June, but pretty much from then on, my recollection was the board ran with it, right? So you know, we could bring it back, but can we check in with Chief of Staff Young so she can help this 55-year-old remember?
Let's do that.
Thank you. So Chief of Staff Sarah Young. So I concur with Deputy Jones that previously the process did start with the Finance Committee in May in terms of providing the initial direction to staff to begin the process of developing business cases. Once we concluded the kind of summer break, those business cases went forward to the full board for consideration. They were not heard in committee prior to the full board, just noting the expedited timeline we're under related to the Budgetary Procedures Act.
Thank you. Chair Moss, did you want to?
Yeah, just a follow up then. So does that mean that the first opportunity for the full board to recommend or request business cases is August, or will that also be this coming meeting in June?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
it will be this coming meeting in June. What we
Okay.
did was we took, you know how Chair Norton gives her brief to the board on the previous finance committee? She'll do both. She'll do the one we had in early May and this.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah.
So, for example, we don't have market increases or FTEs. We got some of what we wanted last year. We don't necessarily need to move on that here as finance committee members, although we did last year. We or another board member could bring that to the body in June to request a business case, or if there's a business case left over from last year, and I have one in particular that we worked up on master teacher roles that I'd like to propose again, but we can bring that up as board members in June or here today, I guess. Those are the two opportunities to get that kicked off. And if I'm understand, and I'm 54, so I'm right behind you. I'm trying to remember myself. Okay.
Oh, if we were all 25 again. Okay. Chief of Staff Young.
Thank you. Just 2 points of clarification. First and foremost, to Chair Moss's statement, the board did already direct staff to develop the USBE FTE and market rate adjustment case as part of the April approval of this process. So we have that direction and have started that process. So that case will be brought forward. The second item I just wanted to highlight is that it is currently there is an action item available on the June Finance Committee meeting specific to this conversation that was left there in follow-up to potential need for additional conversation, depending on the timing of what was able to be achieved in this special meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we passed those motions, and if I am correct, we are moving on to our next action item.
Board Member Norton. Or
Yes.
Chair Norton. I do have a motion. I'm writing it up very quickly here and sending it to
Okay.
Superintendent Stallings. Could I have just a moment, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, maybe we should take a small 10-minute, 8-minute. Oh, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Oh, no, ma'am, I'm all for the break. I just wanted to just call out Kelsey as, you know, part of the communication. It really helped a lot when Kelsey sent that message to the board about what we're doing in here. If maybe the board leadership would direct her to do the same for the June board meeting, saying, hey, you know, when we do this, you as board members will have yet another opportunity to direct staff to start to work on that. That way board members can start thinking right now and preparing for the June board meeting. You know, because backups are due tomorrow for the June board meeting, but if Kelsey could send another message out there saying, hey, use this time to start thinking about requests that you want to direct or want more information on or what have you. So I really think that's a value add when they hear from whoever's in Kelsey's position, but Kelsey, right? So I'm just throwing that out there. No action necessary, but it really great. So thank you.
Great. Okay, we will take a 7-minute break. Let's try to be back here at 6 o'clock. Everyone.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Let's see who's back. Vice Chair Davis. Are you here? Board Member Bogus.
Yes, I am present. I am present.
Thank you. Chair Moss. Board Member Straight. Okay. When we get Vice Chair Davis or Board Member Board Member Moss back, whew, we can get started. So Board Member Bogus, did you send that over?
Yes, ma'am. I actually was on the phone with Superintendent Stallings, and she's helped me prepare a motion, and I am opting to withhold my second motion until June's Finance Committee meeting. And so I'm thankful for the break. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, great. All right, let's see if we have Chair Moss back or Vice Chair Davis. Okay, looks like we have got Vice Chair Davis here. Do we have Board Member Moss? Yay, let's go. Board Member Bogus, do you want to read through that motion?
Yes, so Superintendent Stallings does have that motion, and I would just move that the committee recommends that the board request staff to conduct an analysis on a potential funding request to support a minimum of one full-time music educator per public elementary school building. And I can speak to that should the committee desire that, but it may be self-explanatory.
Well, I will always offer you the opportunity to speak to your motion.
Well, and I appreciate that, ma'am. I just, you know, this is something I think the board is passionate about, and I love the work that the BTS program does, but I do know that there are many elementary schools in this state without a full-time music educator. And it is very clear to me, having taught at all grade levels, that music can save kids. And with the talk today about absenteeism, I think that we need to do our part in evaluating all possibilities that give kids a hook into school. And music is one of those hooks. And the injection model of education doesn't work in math. It doesn't work in ELA. It doesn't work in social studies. And oftentimes we use music education and we present what I call an injection model. We give them one shot a week for 30 minutes and we expect that it's going to do great things. And I would love to see the board evaluate the possibility of supporting something that says, no, we value this. We value what it does with the neural plasticity in the brain. We value what it does and the research that says it supports math, science, and ELA growth because of the neural pathways that are formed in the musical process. And so I would just love to ask the committee to recommend to the board that we just look at an analysis on a potential funding request and just see what that would look like for our state. And then maybe the whole board can consider it.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Yeah, man, I am so supportive of music in schools, especially in our elementary schools. And I'm going to support this motion, but I would really like to also, when we get the information we're looking at, just really have an understanding of what BTS funds and doesn't funds, how many of those teachers are already music teachers and such. I think we need to probably take a look across the board there as well.
May I respond, Chair?
Yes.
I would just like to say that Chair Davis is brilliant because we were just discussing that. And so I do think that that's going to come in that analysis. And so I appreciate you bringing that up on the public record. So thank you, ma'am, and I appreciate the support.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands, board members, go ahead and please vote. And that passes unanimously. All right, are there any other motions to bring up under this agenda item? I am not.
I need to raise my hand. I'm going to say one more thing.
Okay.
I'm supporting lots of these motions, but I just want to put a note on to the agenda item that last year I was so tempted just to say WPU and USBE needs only, because I feel like we get a little shafted every year, honestly, and we've got to keep up with the market, and we've got this high turnover, and then people come back and say, why couldn't you do A, B, and C? Well, because we lost 4 employees. So I'm just going to put this out there. You might hear me over and over again saying, we need to really prioritize our needs in our office to be able to do what the legislature asks us to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. It looks like to me we are on agenda item 1.4, which is the Finance Committee recommendation for program review. Looks like we have both Deputy Superintendent Jones and Assistant Superintendent Jacobson here to speak to this in greater depth.
I'll go first if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Superintendent Jones. So this is a agenda item that's just intended again to get board direction. Well, doesn't necessarily have to be board direction, but at least Finance Committee direction on what you want to see from the sections. If you recall, in the past, we've had sections come and brief the Finance Committee on their section, their activities. Does their budget, is their budget adequate? What actions and programs support the strategic plan of the Board of Education? As we've moved together, and then, Chief of Staff Young is also here to talk about performance measures if that comes up. As we've moved together through that process, there's been a lot of board members that have asked, hey, I would really like to spend some time on more details on programs themselves. That's great. The sections do an awesome job, but there are some programs that I'm interested in, having a little bit more details or information on for my own decision-making purposes, or what they oftentimes feel would benefit the board as a whole. So with that, we put this on here. It is an action item, but again, if it doesn't necessarily have to go to the board. The Finance Committee can set your own schedule on, what programs that you would like us to, do the deeper dives on. So with that, if Cammie could go to the backups, we had, and again, this was an agenda item we didn't get to in our normal May meeting, right? So it got moved to this meeting. We appreciate that. But actually, so if you click on the bottom one first, the report. So just for the benefit of the group, this is just another copy of what you all receive. You as the whole board receive as the monthly budget report. And within that monthly budget report are all the programs. And just to give you an idea about the magnitude of how many programs we have, and Deborah can correct me if I'm wrong, it's 321, I think, or thereabouts. So something like that, so an arduous task of trying to go through every program just isn't there. So in discussions with Finance Committee leadership, Chair Norton and Vice Chair Davis, Deborah had the idea to, so let's go to the next backup, focus on the line items and then the programs within the line items. So it does reduce the list down quite a lot, from 321 or whatever that amount is. I know it's over 300 to us being able to schedule, if the committee wills it, for us to schedule these programs, each month. Not all of them, but one, maybe two programs each month from within a section. even with this though, you can see there's quite a bit or quite a lot of programs that are still out there. So some level of detail from the finance committee on which programs you would like us to schedule sections to come and drill. It would start in August at the earliest. So again, if you can't really decide here today which programs you'd like and would like another, month, we could wait till August for that too, if it's just going to come from the finance committee. But yeah, if you'll scroll down, the line items are identified by the 4 letters, PKAA, PLAA. And then you can see the programs within there. Of course, we all know the MSP is huge, right? But we really thought this list would provide you with a little bit more, a shorter field of view, so to speak, than 321 programs. So, but the different line items, help kind of consolidate that and reduce that overwhelming amount of programs that you could pick from. So Madam Chair, I'll just stop there. If you could just recognize Deborah to see if she has any additional, or Assistant Superintendent Jacobson, she has any additional information for your decision-making purposes today, that would be great.
Thank you. Yes, we would love to hear anything from Assistant Superintendent Jacobson that she would like to add.
So the only thing I would really add at this point is that, and why I kind of suggested this route is because this is how the legislature funds our programs. And this is what the legislature is actually tracking as far as where a lot of our performance measures are targeted towards. That's really all I have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Board member, are there any questions or comments? Chair Moss.
I just want to say thanks to Deputy Superintendent Jones, Assistant Superintendent Jacobson for bringing this up. I think especially as we come out of COVID, we're asking questions about what's working, what's the ROI. The legislature wants to know as we go up there and make our case for funding, they have questions. And so I think this really helps us to be informed, gives us an opportunity to be partners with staff in how these programs are functioning, how the funding relates. And frankly, it's what makes finance, because we can actually get into some real good discussions of what's working well. So I appreciate bringing this up. And I think it's a great way that you itemized it, makes it doable and bite-sized for us as we work through each of those different line items.
Seeing no other hands, I would like to make a comment about this as well. There is some recommended action, as Deputy Superintendent Jones said, and in which we as a finance committee recommend to the full board that we as the finance committee take this on to, in what I see, do our job even better. This gives us time to more fully understand this budget that is a very large part of our entity. So I would recommend that we do take the requested action, unless there's any reason that some of you feel that that's not necessary. Okay, well, with that being said, then I am going to make the motion that the committee recommends that the Utah State Board of Education specific programs within USBE section budgets for presentation by staff to the Finance Committee in subsequent Finance Committee meetings and through the end of state fiscal year 2024. Go ahead and please vote. I'm not seeing Member Bogus.
I'm sorry, Chair. I'm just trying to get the thing so that I can do it. My vote is yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. And at this point, do any of you want to make recommendations for something that you would like to see beginning in August, or do you want to have a little bit of time with that list and maybe bring that up at a later, like in our next, yeah, you could bring it forward. We could have an item on our agenda for our upcoming meeting that we could suggest maybe a few, to get started on. Does
Yeah,
that
I would
sound-
support that idea. I would support, and maybe that's a motion that needs to be made, but I would support that agenda item being
Okay.
added to our subsequent meeting.
All right. Chair Moss, since you are leadership, can we represent the group of three that request that be placed on the finance committee?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's put it on our finance committee agenda, and then if this does not pass through the board, we can take it off. Is that appropriate? Yes,
Right.
I'm getting a yes nod.
I think,
Okay,
point of order, just,
Yes,
I don't
ma'am.
think it has to go through the whole board. It
well,
just
I
has
was
to
just
be,
thinking
the
that,
the committee acts as its own entity to request an agenda item. But I don't know, either way, I mean, either
I
way,
was
it's fine.
I was just thinking it might give leadership more of a nod to this is something that we feel strongly that we need to do. Maybe it doesn't require it, but I think it would be helpful for leadership to know that
Okay,
the finance committee feels strongly that we need to do this.
okay, got it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Item 1.5, application for a new award. It's a statewide longitudinal data systems, SLDS, from the Institution of Education Sciences. And I think we have our director, Aaron Brough from Data and Statistics here to speak to this.
Thank you. Yes, Aaron Brough, the Director of Data and Statistics. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to discuss this with the board for your consideration. Just a couple highlights, and then I do have an individual from UDRC with us as well for additional questions if you like. But basically, this opportunity comes up about every 2 to 4 years from IES, which is, again, the Institution of Educational Science, which I interact with on a regular basis. It was just released May 5th. So again, thank you for the opportunity to present this at this board meeting, because we do not have a lot of time to submit this application if it is approved. Basically what it is the state longitudinal data system grant gives 4 priority areas of improvement in infrastructure and interoperability, or college and career readiness, or school finance, or state policy questions. Is a 4-year grant opportunity. We've received a number of grants in the past, 2009, 2012 and 2015. We did have the grant for that. We did not receive the award for the 2019. The proposal is that we submit a grant application to do infrastructure and interoperability as the main focus. It would be a $4 million ask. It would go over the period of 4 years. We would be doing a subcomponent of doing additional resource work inside of school finance, which is already happening within our USIMS development. But we would do additional help and finance inside of there. And there's a subcomponent in there saying, if the state of Utah is willing, there's the Common Education Data Standards alignment work. They're requesting if we are also willing to do that, that there's some additional fund, about $250,000 that would go on along with that for the period of the 4 years. The request is basically on the infrastructure and interoperability is, one, we would look at our current structure with UDRC, where we have the K-12 system, we have the early education system, we have the higher education system, the technical system, Department of Workforce Services. Currently, we all submit our data into the UDRC system, where it goes through a match process and then goes into a stripping down of personally identifiable information and then put into a very secure location for research to look at policy and impact and such. So anytime we have a question that we need to research about policy or how things are working, a lot of times we have to go into the UDRC system to be able to do those research and answer those questions. The enhancement of the interoperability component would be similar to what we're doing with USIMS, where we want the information to flow more freely. When I say more freely, in a secure, just-in-time manner, we would be applying that concept or that principle to the larger system. So for example, if we had a student interested in we'll say in 11th grade, interested in applying for information at the universities, the concept is they would be able to send that request. That request would flow through their SIS system into the K-12 system, which then would go through an API flag up through UDRC, connect into the university, and that information that they're requesting that could flow back through, and the counselor could have access to that information almost in a real-time instance. Another example could be if a student is transferring from one university to another university, for that information to flow smoothly, the request could be made by the student. That interconnection would transfer that information back and forth. So you're getting a more secure process, more accurate information, and that data transferring back and forth. And then just overall an increased viability of our system. I'm going to stop right there. Let me just give you a couple dates. We did have to submit a letter of intent that was due on the 19th. I did submit one after consulting with the superintendency about this last week. We did submit that last Thursday to make sure that that was in. That letter of intent actually was just a form that I had filled out, so that was not included in the backup here. We basically put a letter of information of what we're intending to do, but that's just if you will, an abstract of the actual application that, if approved by the board, that we start putting together. And I'll stop right there and entertain any questions. Chair Norton, you are on mute.
So sorry. Board Chair Moss and then Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you, Aaron. I have the usual question that comes with any federal grant. What, if any, are the strings? Are we required to do anything with our data that we wouldn't otherwise do if we were spending our own money on this?
Okay, so the strings attached are, no, we're not connecting our data with the federal government in any way. This is, everything is within our, this is all Utah based. The strings attached basically are guidance and adherence to the actually project plan that they will monitor with us. And it's also a sharing out of lessons learned that we have with the educational community at large throughout the nation. What are we doing? How is it working? And so there will be a number of conferences that we'll attend and we share out. So those are the primary string attachments, if you will, that we have with this. But so the question is there anything that we're doing outside of what we've been normally doing? No, it's not. This opportunity allows us to expand the system. Whereas right now we don't have the state funding to do this level of expansion from the state legislature. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, Chair.
Yes, sir.
So the lessons learned part I love. On the monitoring, is that just them ensuring fidelity to what we submitted as our planned use of the money, or is there any external monitoring that we use it for something that is in according to their plan?
Thank you for the question. The monitoring really is fidelity to our application is what we go through. And so through the different applications and awards that we've already received, that has been my experience all the way through. Is we put together the plan, we put together the budget narrative, we put through the project objectives, and then we speak with the moderators from the federal government saying, and we are meeting these obligations. We are keeping, we are spending according to both state and federal guidelines on what the money is usable. And again, based upon what's inside of our project plan, that if it gets approved, that's what we'd follow. So I have not seen any other, I've never seen the federal government say, you need to do something according to their plan. It's always been based upon, here's our application of how we will utilize and execute both the project goals and the budgets. That is all I've ever seen them request in those monitoring calls.
Thank you. Okay, and I assume that application will be, as you described it, expansion of what we've already identified as our own needs and priorities, and hopefully they say yes, and if they say no, then we've stuck with our own decision-making priorities. So thank you.
Thank you.
I also see, after Vice Chair Davis, I see that Superintendent Dixon has a comment or question, and so does Deputy Superintendent Jones. Go ahead, Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. I just asked about this earlier, but I want to make sure I'm understanding fully. So we're seeking a grant to do what we are going to do anyway with our own state money, and this would supplant some of that. So this would save us some dollars, basically, with the one difference being the additional service that this would provide is that we hadn't planned on doing before, is that our students would be able to connect with universities to send information, transcripts, see which of their credits fills their AP needs, what they get, all that stuff that other students in other states have access to right now, but we've never spent the money on because we don't have a lot of money here. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. So the financial side is already in place in plan moving forward. Okay. Again, the funds are not intended to supplant, it's supplemented to help along. The item where we do the interoperability development is not currently scheduled with the budgets that we'd have. And so we would not be able to move forward with that if we did not get the grant at this time. That's not saying that we couldn't do it down the road, but it's expensive development that obviously it's going to need some resources to get it accomplished.
Okay, thank you.
Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This goes back to Chair Moss's question about IES. And in fact, I just listened to a presentation from them recently, and it was interesting to me. I've never really understood the relationship with the federal government, and even though they're part of it, they get funding, they sit outside of it, and they really populate the What Works clearinghouse and have some of those operational pieces. So they don't have the same kind of monitoring impact that we see with some of our other federal funds. Now, Aaron explained it well, but I just, having heard that a couple of weeks ago, gives me confidence that we're not bound. I also want to talk a little bit about the student data privacy, which is important to all of us. And of course, Katie gets right in the middle of that to make sure when things are submitted that all of those boxes are checked. But I did hear from the higher ed side on the interoperability, also something that gave me confidence, and that in the student data privacy. And that is the way that they're intending to build out this system. Aaron could give you the technical aspects, as could our IT folks. I'm going to give you the Superintendent Dixon version. And that is that the data isn't necessarily housed in a different spot. So it would be housed normally as we do in our secure servers, but it's an ability to grab it and use it and then let it go. In other words, they don't take the data and store it on their servers. And Aaron, I probably didn't say that very well, but I really felt confident after I listened to the way that they would grab and use the data versus storing the data, which then gives some pause and concern. We would still have control over all of that with the interoperability function that they're trying to build out. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Jones?
Madam Chair, yes, all the comments I completely agree with. I think it's a added value or benefit. I can see some support from our legislators too, not all of them. But it's, our UDRC colleagues, and, one of which is here today, can attest that, or Aaron too, back when we had the 2015 grant, it was SLDS money that helped with the transition of, where UDRC was created by, I believe it was Senator Anderig's bill, right? And so he knew all about the SLDS grant. USIMS is limited in scope just to interoperability with the LEA. So similar to what Superintendent Dixon just described, that's our methodology too. It's a real-time push-pull with only keeping data that we, because there's this whole thing about, well, oftentimes we, staff here ask for data that quote unquote we already have. So by promoting that interoperability, we'll streamline that. It'll be in a safe environment, but it also expands the ability to interoperate with higher education, which is something that Anderegg is a proponent of, right? Senator Anderegg, I should say. I apologize. And there's others that are too. There will be that concern about federal funding, but again, as always, Superintendent Dixon is spot on. I really think it's a benefit that we distinguish IES and their relation or position, I guess, with the federal government, as she brought up, and we can do that in the board meeting. So overall, this is a potential win for us in the sense of staying on the road to awesome, to where real-time data exchanges make a difference to decision-making, which ultimately serves our educators and students. So thank you. Over.
Thank you. Superintendent Dixon? Did you want to follow up?
Just hand needs to go down. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, no, we like that. All right. I don't see any other hands. So board members, let's go ahead and please vote. The recommended action is that the committee approve the request for USBE staff to submit an application for the 2023 SLDS grant opportunity and forward the proposal to the full board for approval. Board members, please vote. Okay, it looks like that's a 3-1 with board member Bogus opposed. And if I am not mistaken, that takes care of our agenda for this evening's special meeting. And I would love one final motion.
Motion.
I
to
would-
adjourn.
Go ahead, Coach.
Oh, sorry.
Nope.
All
it's good.
right. Motion to adjourn has been made. All in favor? We can just do this by voice. Aye.
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 Great. Thank you all very much. Staff, thank you for your long day you put in. And
Amen.
for all of you that we're here to support. We got some good work done. And if not sooner, we will see you all a week from Thursday.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chair.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Chair. Thanks, everyone.